sake. You really think anti-Semites care if you're assertive as a Jew or passive as you think that they care?
Right.
It was a really nice response, but
Yeah, it was a good piece, but it was
nice piece, but come
it's
on.
like a freshman suit.
Yeah, exactly. I'm against anti-Semitism. All right, mazel tov, that takes courage.
Right, and let's have a vibrant Judaism.
Yes.
No, I want the boring Judaism that I knew as a kid.
Good morning, Boker Tov, good Shabbos. Welcome back. Nice to see you all. Welcome back. It's going to be less than 110 degrees outside today, so it's a balmy day here in Southern California. Welcome. A couple of quick announcements. First, Cantor Barron, please welcome. Put your hands together for Cantor Phil Barron.
Thank you. I was told to hold the microphone so people at home can hear this.
Yes.
So tomorrow we're having a very special concert. UCLA has the first ever chair of Jewish music. It's called the Mickey Katz Chair of Jewish Music, because Mickey Katz was funny, but he was also an incredible musician. And that person is Mark Kligman. He happens to be Orthodox, and he also conducts a choir and an orchestra over at Young Israel of Beverly Hills, is what it's called. And of course, as you know, they don't have an orchestra on high holidays, but before the high holidays, they do a couple of concerts to show the beauty of orchestral music and of cantorial music right before the holidays begin. The cantor over there is Nati Baram. He's an Israeli cantor. He's coming here tomorrow with Mark Kligman and this symphony and the choir from Young Israel Beverly Hills. We rarely are able to do things with the Orthodox because they don't come over here on Shabbos and we don't go over there. So tomorrow's a great opportunity to do that, 4 p.m. right here at VBS in Cher Lapati. So I hope you can join us. That's
Free.
my
It's
plug.
free?
It's not free.
How much is it?
It costs $18.
$18.
And that will help.
If you can't afford it, you can come for $15.
That's right. Come see me. If
Bring
it's
your
a
tax
problem.
returns so we can appreciate. No, please come.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Come enjoy the music. Good. Thank you, Cantor. 4 o'clock tomorrow, UCLA, Cantor Baram, orchestra, choir, elephants, giraffes. And Herschel will tell a funny story. Okay, good morning. I hope everybody's well. Couple of quick announcements so everybody knows what's going on. Welcome, it's good to see you all. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome back. Following service, following our learning, you're welcome to come in the other room. There's a service this morning. There's no bar mitzvahs or simchas, just a nice davening, followed by lunch, and the Parshat study group will meet this afternoon as well. So come and join us for that. This coming week, everything's open now. School's open. So Wednesday night, which is 9/11 actually, Wednesday night we're going to do a preparation for the holiday session. A conversation about the holiday, its themes. Are we on? Are we okay? Good. Holidays, themes. It's Wednesday night. It's 7:30, I think. And everybody's invited. Come, it's free. Get you ready for the holidays. So come on Wednesday night. Shabbos, of course, Torah study, 9 o'clock. On the 21st, there it is, a big picture of me in the paper. And I didn't have to kill anybody. Right. God knows. Yes, it's exactly right. I'm going to be quarterbacking the SC Trojans today because they ran out of quarterbacks. The 21st is Slichot, and that's Saturday night. We're going to be taking a look at Jews and Germans. Rabbi Farkas was invited by the German government to come and spend some time in Germany last year, and to see how the how Germans have remembered the Holocaust and responded. And he's going to lead us in a conversation on that topic. Can Jews and Germans, can we forgive the Germans? Have they shown that they've learned something from this? Our guests, we're going to show a film. There's a wonderful new documentary. Pop, you got to move over just a little bit, I think. There's a wonderful new documentary about an Israeli couple that moves to Berlin and how their survivor grandparents respond to this. And then we'll have a conversation with Rabbi Farkas based on his trip, and Dr. Richard Campbell, who was the cultural officer of the United States Embassy in Berlin for 30 years and one of the archivists of the Holocaust in Germany. So join us, then we'll have service, then we'll have dessert and services on the 21st, and then of course the next week the holiday begins. So if you're a member of VBS, and make sure your membership is all taken care of, you should get a call from us if it's not, and we'll have your high holiday tickets in the mail very soon. They're going to have pickup days where you can come pick up the tickets, make it easier for everybody. And then the holiday begins on that Sunday night. Just a quick warning so you hear it from me. The security this year is significantly stepped up for obvious reasons. So number one, it's tshuva time. Please forgive us for that. They're going to need you to bring an ID to show that your name on the ticket and your ID match each other. And then you're going to have to walk through a metal detector. It's not TSA. You don't have to take your shoes off or your clothes off. Sorry, what? They don't touch you. They just want to make. God, you're in a good mood today. What did you have for dinner last? What was Shabbos dinner last night at the Ruddas and the Silvermans? It was hot. So just be aware. That means it would be a really good idea to come early, come early, especially on Yom Kippur, when all of us show up at the same time. Be a really good idea to come early. The other really good idea, right with you? The other really good idea is, unless you really, really have to drive here, there's going to be a coupon for Uber and Lyft. And unless, people who live reasonably far in the San Fernando Valley, it's about $5 to get here. And it's a much better way to get here than having to drive and find a parking place, because the parking gets dicey around here. Okay, and Uber and Lyft is very quick. They leave you right in front of the door, and then they'll pick you right up. And it's a wonderful way to get here, and there'll be a coupon that you can use that's a little cheaper. Yes, please.
At the gate, volunteer to be checked. Don't wait until they ask.
Well, they're going to check everybody, so you don't even have to volunteer. But you can volunteer to be nice. That's the thing, yeah. We'll be out there passing out candy and water and sandwiches and roast beef. Yes?
I'm sorry, when is everything with Rabbi Farkas?
That's on the night of the 21st? Is that what it is? It's the Saturday night, yeah. It's the Slichot night. Saturday night. What's today? 7th. It's the 21st. It's in 2 weeks. Yeah. Starts in you'll see it in the synagogue announcements. Okay? I think that's all the announcements I can think of. Yes, next week, which is on the 15th, is the Sephardic Slichot, which is a beautiful experience, wonderful experience. All right, if you have a chumash, you should have a chumash. If you don't have a chumash, can you get one chumash? There's a bunch around. 1088. We do a little bit of Torah today. 1088. 1088. Pass them around, pass them around. You guys need one? We have an extra one over here. Mark, do me a favor, pass one back over there. Bruce, pass one back over here. I'm going to read these to you, but if you have one, it'll be easier. Or we can go get some more if you need. Synagogue is not wanting in Torah. Okay, ready? Okay, here we go. I'll read you the sections if you want. Doug, you want to do me a favor? Yes, I did. You want go get me a few more. I'll send Doug. You know where the Chumashim are? You can either go in the sanctuary and just steal them from the back rows, or you can get a maintenance person to bring a few. Tell the maintenance we need about 10 more. The maintenance people are in the kitchen. Okay? I won't say anything till you get back. Okay, if you have it, it's 1088. This is the middle of the book of Deuteronomy. Moses speaking to the people of Israel. In Hebrew, Shoftim v'shotrim titen lachem, titen lacha. Shoftim are judges. Shotrim are police officers. The translation is, you shall appoint magistrates and officials. Magistrates and officials are much more exalted than cops and judges, right? Cops and judges you're going to need for yourself, right? B'chol sharecha, in all the gates of the tribes. Asher yel analu and ten l'shivtcha. In all the places where you're going to live, in all the places you're going to be, you're going to need cops and judges. You're going to need leaders. You're going to need people to adjudicate cases. Now, before we go one more step, stop for a second. The things that are most obvious are the things that are invisible to us, but the things that are most obvious are the things that are most important. Thank you so much. The Torah is not concerned, Deuteronomy is not concerned with the eternal life of your soul. It's not about how do you live forever after death? How do you get into heaven? It's not about how do you cleanse your soul and become. What is it about? It's about creating a sacred, just society. Creating the just society. It's a very this-worldly spirituality. How do you create the just society? Second really obvious thing. The human material, thank you so much, out of which the just society will be created, the human material is flawed. I mean, think about it. You're dealing with God. God can do anything. God creates galaxies, splits seas, destroys Pharaoh. Why doesn't God just make us all good people? Wouldn't that make us so much simpler? God removes avarice, envy, jealousy, murderous aggression from human beings. And the people of Israel enter the land as saints. So much cheaper. Come on, Edgar. Thanks so much. Just let them down right over here, and we'll pass them out. Thank you so much. Gracias. Thank you, sir. But that's not how it works. Look, I mean, wouldn't it be a better world that way? Wouldn't it be a better world that if you stole something, your arm fell off? Wouldn't that be great? If you lie, your nose falls off. That's my world. I think what a great world, right? Guy gets up on television, tells you a lie in a commercial, his nose falls off. I know he's not telling the truth, right? Right? This used car, it's a great car. It'll last you for a long, no nose. All right, I know he's a liar. Arms fall off. Wouldn't that be easier where a guy murders someone, drops dead? Save me the problem. It doesn't work that way. Interesting. God doesn't work that way. Now to think about this, this is so obvious. God gives us free choice. You have free choice. Human beings choose. You can choose the kind of person you're going to be. This is the whole rationale of the holiday. You choose your character. There is no force in the universe which makes you an immoral person except your own decisions. Therefore, you are responsible for the character you are. You are the accumulation of your choices. Yes, we're all born with constituent characterological elements. I happen to have an addiction to ice cream, right? You know, some people are kind, some people are not, some people are gentle, some people are rough, some people are aggressive, some people are funny, some people are boring. Yes, but we all choose the kind of people we're going to be. And God doesn't jump in and say, no, don't do that. Told you at the beginning, here are the rules, but you got to decide if you're going to keep the rules. And if we're going to create a just society, you're going to create a just society out of free people making free choices with all of the predilections and problems and flaws of the human character. When you study Gemara, when you study Talmud, there's a kid studying Talmud, junior high school. The first Talmud you learn is Bava Metzia, chapter 1. Shnayim ochsim betalis. Two guys walk into the court, into the base medrash, each of them with a shirt, talis, a garment. One guy says, it's mine, I found it. The other guy says, it's mine, I found it. And you say to yourself, what kind of crazy spirituality is this? What about my eternal soul? What about my afterlife? What about, no, says the Talmud. We'll get to that, eternal soul after. First, we got to figure out, how do you live in a world? How do you make peace in a world? How do you create a society in which two guys walk into a base midrash with a half a shirt saying, it's mine? I mean, I was at Home Depot the other day. I saw two guys almost get into a fist fight over a parking lot, a parking space. This parking lot has 100,000 spaces at Home Depot. I mean, you could park China in that parking lot. And these two guys, like the one guy was waiting for the space and the guy backed out. The other guy jumped into the space. So the guy jumps out of his car and starts pounding on the guy's car. And the guy opens the car and the guy's as big as a hill, And I watched it and I just, like you said, create a just society out of these people. But that's the Talmud's idea. That's where it starts. You see that it's so obvious you don't even notice it. So the purpose of this is to create the just society. That's what Deuteronomy is obsessed with. How do I create the just society? Out of the human materials that I'm giving. So what are you going to need? Cops and judges. So what?
I said
Erasers. No, that's exactly right. Cops and judges. You're going to need people to enforce the law. You're going to need people to adjudicate conflicts. You're going to need people to interpret the law. And you have the law, by the way, in front of you. So it's not about not having the law. You have the law, but every law that's written down needs to be adjudicated. And so you have to have a process of adjudication. Leaders have to lead. And we have to decide from day to day and month to month and year to year and era to era what kind of society we want to be. I mean, without getting into the politics of the thing, that's what a presidential election really ought to be about. What kind of society do we want to have for our children? Where do you want to raise your kids? What kind of society? In political philosophy, we play these games. You try to think, you simulate interesting kinds of societies. What kind of society should we have? We visited Denmark a couple of years ago, right? Your kids are in Denmark, so we were talking about it last night. So Denmark, the tour guide's an American guy married to American Jewish guy actually, married to a Danish woman, and he's lived there for 30 years, and he says, a wonderful place, right? You get everything for free. I mean, a woman is pregnant, she gets maternity leave paid for by the state, the kid is born, there's child care, there's paternity leave, there's maternity leave, there's free education from early childhood through university, through graduate school, there's free health care. All you do is pay 90% of your income in taxes. And he says it's the happiest society in the world, in Europe. No, I'm serious. No. All right, so there is a case of a society that's made a choice. We in America have made different choices. It seems to me what politics really isn't, the show we see on television these days, which is just a extended version of American game shows, What politics is, as Aristotle defined it, is the discussion of the common good. The discussion that carries the search for the common good. What is the common good? What society do we want to live in? So Deuteronomy says, Shoftim v'Shoftim Telehem. To start with cops, start with judges. Now, who are going to be your cops and judges? Here's the problem. Cops and I don't know if you knew this, but cops and judges are also human. They carry flaws too. So how do you create a system that in some ways mitigates the flaws of those who were responsible for carrying out justice? That's going to be the next topic, Billy.
What it seems to me of interest is that the Levites were not included in this discussion. So therefore, the
Levites
law is separate from the enforcement.
Well, you'll see Levites get schlepped into this in a minute anyway. They are included because they own the books, because they were literate, because they're the ones who carry the law with them. So they are the first ones charged with interpreting the law. And Levites are an interesting tribe. They're the only tribe that doesn't have property. They live among you, around you, with you, but they're not propertied. So they're already removed one step from the various temptations. Because once you have property, you have temptations. I don't know if you knew this, right? Because once I have something, once I have wealth I want to defend, if I'm the one voting on taxation, I already have an interest. And the question of conflict of interest becomes a really interesting problem. We send people to Washington, Sacramento, downtown LA, and we say, block out all of your private interests and seek the common good. And I'm sure that's what they do. Every single one of them, right? Right? I mean, so you read the Federalist Papers, so James Madison, right? And Hamilton, these guys are very smart. I mean, they understood that it doesn't work that way. So what you do is you put them in groups and they block out each other's private interests, right? I mean, the Federalist is an exercise in trying to do what the Torah is going to do in the very next sentence, right? I'm on page 1088. You shall not judge unfairly. They shall govern the people with due justice. You will not judge unfairly. It's interesting that it goes from they to you. You see how that switches there? Right? They shall govern the people. You shall not judge unfairly. You shall show no partiality. You shall not take bribes, for bribes blind the eyes of discerning, upset the pleas of the just. And then comes the principle, which is on the wall of almost every synagogue in America. Tzedek, tzedek, tirdov. Tzedek, which is justice, fairness, balance. Tzedek, tzedek, tirdov. Now, here's the question. It doesn't say tzedek ta'aseh, or ta'achoz, or titfos. It says tirdof. Those of you who know Hebrew, it doesn't mean you will have justice, you will obtain justice. It says you will pursue justice. What does that mean? What does that mean? Yes. It's hard to get. You have to pursue it, but it's really, it's hard to grasp. You may not get it, but you have to pursue it. Yeah, and why it's repeated tzedek. Tzedek is a long, long story. This is going to be the beginning of a conversation. The whole parsha is about civil leadership. Okay, Michael. Good.
In terms of pursuit thing,
Yes.
it says in the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of justice.
Yes.
It says we are going to
Happiness.
pursue. Well,
Pursuit of happiness. It was the pursuit of property
Pursuit
until he
of
scratched it
happiness.
out and put a happy.
But the thing that I wanted to just mention is that
Yeah.
at the very beginning, in that very first sentence
Yeah.
of the parsha, it says you, which is the polity, the people,
Yes.
shall appoint, which means it sounds like they're having an election.
Well, that's going to be a question. So that's the question I really want to take up today. Is, again, when I was a kid and I studied political philosophy, right? So you have a question of authority. Who has the right to lead? Who has the right to rule? What powers does authority have? What makes an authority legitimate? What is the legitimacy of an authority? Okay, in America, we have a very explicit principle of legitimacy, right? You become, if you get a majority of the electoral college, you get to call yourself president. You move into 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, right? Right? That's our principle of legitimacy, right? In other countries, you have other principles of legitimacy. I don't know how many of you are following what's going on in England. Fun, huh? I mean, who thought the British, who were so buttoned up and so tight, so constipated, and they're screaming at each other, and when you scream in a British accent, it's just lovely, it's what? Order. Yeah. Oh my God. Yes. And the funny thing is, and they were interviewing a guy who's a member of Parliament on NPR. So he said, well, tell us how this works, because we Americans aren't familiar. He says, the first thing you need to know is that the House of Commons is a very small room. It's not like your Congress, which is this large hall. It's a very small room. And so we're literally sitting on top of each other. And half of the Congress, half on one side, and the other half on the other side. And we face each other, and we scream into each other's faces. This is the oldest democracy on the planet, you understand? It's just wonderful. And they're screaming at each other. And, and they have a big decision to make, right? They're about to make a big decision, a really big decision. And Mr. Johnson is a very colorful character. Very colorful. Unfortunately, we don't have anybody as colorful leading us. All right, turn to page 1090. I want to take a look at two more snippets of this, and then I want to look at the background, because there's a tremendous background that's behind this. 1090, last line on the page. Ki yipalei mimcha davar. If a case is too difficult for you to decide, you have a legal issue, and it's really hard to figure it out. It seems to fit between two laws, or the laws can be interpreted. What do you do? Bruce, do you want to ask something?
Well, I just noticed that you skipped over to stoning.
I did, yes. Yeah, I did.
And I wanted to ask
Do you want to go
about
back to that? And
Yeah, because this is
I've often wanted to reenact this part, but
this is for me what's one of the reasons why I struggle with the book.
yeah.
Because on the one hand, we have this lovely verse, right? Justice, justice, you shall pursue.
Yes.
And then on the very next page,
Kill him.
we have stoning.
Yeah.
And,
Cool.
And I don't know that there's an answer to this.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
But it's hard because we read the book and we see the sections that we want to see,
All right.
and then we struggle with other sections. And I'm just wondering, for you
Right.
personally,
Yeah.
how you read.
All right, so this is
and how you.
great question.
Yeah.
Wonderful question. And I'm going to evade it for a moment because I want to get to what I wanted to get to. The question is, and Rabbi Gelman and I have had this conversation going for a while because we're we'll get to Kitetse in a couple of weeks, and we're going to be right back where we started our which is when you come across a section of Torah which completely morally offends you. It doesn't even baffle you. I mean, this says if it's baffling for you. But there are sections that you don't go, I wonder. There are questions you go, yuck. And you say, what do you do? What do you do with that? How do you deal with sections of the Torah that are morally just gross? Do you say, so you can think of what the options are, right? One option is to say, everything in Torah is perfect, I'm just reading it wrong. That's sort of the way Midrash did it. The Midrash would find all kinds of quirky ways to say, well, it's not really what it looks like, right? It says an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but it doesn't mean you knock out a guy's eye or knock out his tooth, because after all, what if you're dealing with a blind guy? What are you going to do? I mean, so the Midrash says it must be a different way to read it. And the authority of Midrash is that oral Torah came along with written Torah. So written Torah can't be read without oral Torah, without Midrash. That's one way to read it, okay? A different way to read it is completely different. It's to say historical. You can read it as a historical document. Yeah, in its time and place, this was an appropriate law. I mean, I'll show you the one that you mentioned, which I didn't want to get into, but now you got me into it, right? Right? If somebody's worshiping another god, what do? Right? It brings idolatry into the community. Okay? So you would think that the answer is lynch him. Lynching is used in many societies for the moral law which is most egregious, right? The Torah says no. A person shall be put to death on the testimony of 2 or more witnesses, and not on the testimony of one. Which means, even in the case of an egregious sin, there is an adjudication of the case. We don't allow lynching. The community is not permitted to, as it were, take the law into its own hands, pull the guy out and string him up. The community has to have a procedure for adjudicating the case. Now, that may seem obvious to you, but it's not obvious in certain communities where lynching is practiced. And this says, no, I mean, if there's a crime, there's a crime, and it has to be addressed, but it has to be addressed through an adjudication process. So that's already historically a moral advance. Now, you can say, I'm still disgusted by what's written here, and I agree with you. Right, there are. And that's a third way to read it, which is to simply say that we progress. I mean, so we see things differently than the Torah sees things, because we have different experiences than the writers of the Torah. And these are different ways of reading the same thing. And then finally what you can do is you can say, okay, if this really bothers me, what is it in me? If the Torah is a mirror for a moment, do it this way. What is it in me that this is pointing to which really bothers me? Right? I mean, so we could get into that question also, but let's stop there, because I want to get to the other stuff, and I'll come back to that. We're going to get to Kitetse in a couple of weeks, and we're going to have the argument we've had every year for the last now 4 years. So about Kitetse. One of us thinks Kitetse is a great moral advance, and the other one, not so much.
Doesn't the Torah also say
Yeah.
that it's not simply the testimony of 2 witnesses, but that the transgressor has to have been told in advance about committing his sin?
You're right. That's oral Torah. So what the rabbis did was this. So here's what the rabbis did. That's option number 2. Option number 2 is Midrash, right? You take what's there and you interpret it. So what the rabbis did is said, look, I can't erase this because it's in the Torah, but I'm going to find hints. So they created a whole structure that if you're going to carry out a capital punishment, it's virtually impossible to do it. I mean, so those of you who like to listen to radio, talk radio, and people say, either the Jewish tradition is for capital punishment or against capital punishment, here's the truth. The Torah has capital punishment in it. It does. Right here. It's right here. Bruce pointed it out, right? The rabbis added a layer, because the rabbis were worried about putting somebody to death who wasn't really guilty of the crime. And they were much more concerned about themselves becoming murderers than about letting a guy go to jail on a lesser charge. So what they did was create a structure based on hints in the text, which make it virtually impossible for you to ever put anybody to death. So in theory, capital punishment is just, according to the Jewish tradition. It's just that flawed human beings can never do it, because flawed human beings are flawed. right? I mean, how many guys have been let out of death row now based on DNA evidence, right? I mean, and that's the question. So here's the answer to your question. If you want to know how do you put somebody to death for a capital crime, here's how it has to happen, right? I'm not making this up. This is true, okay? So you have to be sitting watching. Two people have to be sitting in a park, and they see a person run by going, help me, help me, help me. He's going to kill me. He's going to kill me. He's going to kill me. And then the murderer runs up with a big knife saying, I'm going to kill the guy, I'm going to kill the guy, I'm going to kill the guy. The two witnesses have to stop the murderer and say, excuse me, are you going to kill the guy? He says, yes, that's my intention. He said, do you know that's a capital crime? He said, yes, I understand that. And do you know that if you do it in front of us witnesses, that the punishment could be so and so? And tell them the stoning, for example, right? And he has to say, yes, I acknowledge that if I do this crime, the punishment is stoning. Okay, go ahead, right? And then he kills the guy in front of the two witnesses, okay? This is what has to happen. Now, the two witnesses are brought to court. They're separated. They're each interrogated by the court. They have to have completely matching descriptions of the situation. What color shirt was he wearing? What time was it? How big was the knife? What's his mother's middle name? What's his dog's name? If there's any discrepancy in the testimony of the two witnesses, the case gets dropped down to manslaughter. If the two witnesses agree on everything, now you have 23 judges hear this case. By the way, there are no prosecutors and defense attorneys. It's all done by judges, right? Judges, one judge plays prosecutor, one judge plays defense, and it's chosen by the court. The judges now decide, starting from the youngest to the oldest. If all 23 judges agree, the case is thrown out. Because you can't get 23 Jews to agree on anything unless they're paid off. It has to be at least a majority. But there has to be some dissenting opinion. If it's a dissenting opinion, if there's some dissenting opinion, but the majority of the judges say, okay, he's guilty, capital crime, then what happens is you take the guy out, and guess who gets to throw the first stone? The witnesses. So the Talmud says, really? In that case, you're never going to put anybody to death. And the rabbis say, That's how it works. So what you're doing is you're saying, yes, in theory, I understand that capital punishment is just. In theory, it's just. But only if you're God and know everything. No human court can know everything. Because eyewitnesses can be mistaken. Because evidence can be tainted. Because judges can be swayed. There's so many reasons why. So we're never going to put anybody to death based on it. So that's how the Talmud dealt with the issue. Okay, let's go. Can I go back to this for a moment? If the case is too baffling you to decide, be it controversy over homicide, civil law, or assault, matters of dispute in your courts, you shall repair to the place the Lord your God will have chosen. So there's a high court, and appear before the Levitical priest. There you go. There's your priest, or the judge. Magistrate means judge, shofet, in the charge at the time. So there's going to be an adjudication. Someone has to interpret. So you have to have a set of judges whose authority by the Torah itself is to interpret the law and apply it to circumstances. This is the clause that gives the rabbis their power. This is the clause that gives me power. You come to me and you say, Rabbi, is Dr. Pepper kosher for Pesach? On what authority do I say yes or no? Here, right here. And by the way, you all know this. You don't know that you know this, but you all know this, right? Because when Hanukkah comes, you're all going to stand in front of menorahs and say, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech olam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav etzivanu, lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. Blessed is God, whose presence fills the universe, who has sanctified us with commandments and commanded us to light Hanukkah candles. Go ahead. Find me Hanukkah candles in this book. Hanukkah took place 1,200 years after this book was finished. What do you mean Hanukkah candles? Where are you commanded to light Hanukkah candles? You're not. You know what you're commanded to do? To listen to your rabbi. That's what this is. Listen to the next line. You present the judge with a problem. When they've announced to you the verdict, you'll carry out the verdict from the place of the Lord. Carry it out scrupulously. Act in accordance with the instructions given to you. This is the authority of a rabbi. So when you say, Asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav lahadlik ner shel Chanukah, the mitzvah isn't really Hanukkah candles. The mitzvah is listening to your rabbi who told you to light Hanukkah candles. That's the mitzvah. That's what gives rabbis the source of authority to guide and shape the community. Okay? One more line, then I'm going to answer some questions, but then I want to get to the stuff I really want to get to. Page 1092. Now it gets really interesting. Ready? If, the word is ki in Hebrew, which is if after you've entered the land that the Lord God has assigned to you and taken possession of it and settled in it, you decide, you decide, I will set a king over me and do as all the nations about me. So what's the motivation for having a king? I want to be like the Goyim. Already the Torah is telling you, this is like my mother used to have the same thing. My mother said, I'd say, Mom, I want to do this. I knew she didn't want me to do it, but I'd ask her anyway, can I do this? And she'd look at me and say, do whatever you want. That's that sort of half-aggressive trap of mothers, right? Which is, you know I don't want you to do it, but you're asking me because you want my permission to do it. And I'm not going to tell you not to do it because you have to decide not to do it. So I'm going to give you this sort of sneering look on my face and say, do whatever you want. You want a king because you want to be like the Goyim? You're tired of being special Jews ruled by the Lord God himself? Okay, fine. You want a king? In the words of the great Rabbi Jackie Mason, all right. Gesundheit. Right? Okay, you can have a king. You shall be free to set a king. In Hebrew, sum tasim alechem melech. Go ahead, put a king over yourself. It's actually, the Hebrew is much more sarcastic than the English. Sum tasim, put a damn king over yourself. You want a king? Have a king. Only one problem. What's the problem with a king? What's the biggest problem with a king? He thinks he's the king. The problem with a king is he thinks he's the king. And I want to make sure that your king doesn't think he's the king. So here's the rules. Ready? Number one chosen by the Lord your God. Now, how are you going to do that? I mean, like you go to God and say, okay, pick one of us. Like, so lightning hits, what do we throw? What do you do? I mean, how does that work? And then right away it contradicts that. Because if God's going to choose him, why do I need the next line, which says, be sure to set as a king over yourself one of your own people. Don't set a foreigner. But if God's choosing him, why do you have to tell me that? All right, so why don't I want a foreigner ruling me?
Conflict of interest.
Yes, so conflict of interest with another nation. What else? Why else? He doesn't know us. He doesn't know our story. He doesn't know our narrative. He doesn't know our culture. He doesn't know what's sacred to us. He's going to lead us astray. The Torah's obsession is preserving this religious culture. Don't choose somebody who doesn't know how we got out of Egypt and got here. Right? If this guy don't know the story of how we got out of Egypt, he can't be your king. Right? You must not set a foreigner. All right, ready? Now, number 2. No foreigners. That's the first rule. Okay? Number 2. He shall not keep many horses or send people back to Egypt to add to his horses. Well, I can understand why the Torah doesn't want you going back to Egypt. Right? That I understand. Why horses? Like what's horses? What do horses got to do with this?
Standing army.
Okay, could be standing army. Well, horses, riding army, right? Cavalry. But think of it. What do horses represent in this world? Wealth, power. But think about one more little, just one little. So you have a guy on a horse. Remember all those statues in Central Park? A guy on a horse, right? If you're standing next to a guy on a horse, which way are you looking? Up. Guy on a horse thinks, I'm above everybody. He put you above you. You're putting a whole cadre of people. A bunch of horses means a bunch of guys on a horse. You're putting people above the populace. Right? All right, number 1, no foreigners. Number 2, no horses. It gets worse. Right? 3, he will not have many wives. Oh, come on. I mean, come on. Wait, give me a break. I mean, what fun is it to be king if you can't have... I mean, come on. Why not many wives? Well, that's true, too. So you end up with... how many crown princes are there in Saudi Arabia? I think? Something like 1,800, right? Because these guys can I know how to get along, right? Right? But why not many... What's the problem with many wives? Yeah, what's the problem, Pop?
You have the different religions coming in.
Yeah, what happens is, the reason a king has many wives is not, for romance or sexuality. The reason a king has many wives is alliances with other kingdoms. You marry the princess of the neighbors, you now have a blood alliance, right? But the problem is that she brings with her her gods. So what's going to happen is Solomon's going to have 900 wives. And there's going to be boulevards in Jerusalem that are temples to the gods of these princesses. And that's going to lead you astray. You're not only going to have political alliances, you're going to have cultural alliances. All right, so no foreigners, no horses, no wives, a few wives, right? He shall not amass silver or gold to excess. To excess. The Hebrew is me'od. like you can be middle class. You drive a Toyota. Oh, give me a Lexus, all right, but no Maseratis. Right? But why? Why not silver and gold? Why can't a king be rich? I mean, yeah, because once he has, first of all, if he has silver and gold, he's profiting over it. And then you get this, what do you call it? Emoluments. There's a word that none of us knew before the Trump administration. Emoluments. How much can a king or a ruler use his position to increase his own personal wealth, right? I mean, this is an interesting issue. All right, now, you get no horses, no wives, and no gold. Like, what fun is it to be king? What's left? Exactly right. What's left? That's exactly right. What's left, Rose? No, seriously, what's left? His job is to do what? What's his job? Okay, when he's seated on the royal throne, he'll have a copy of this teaching, this Torah, written for him on a scroll by a Levitical priest. Let it remain with him and let him read it all his life so he may learn to revere the Lord his God, to observe faithfully every word of the teaching as well as its laws. Then he will knock at haughtily. Levilti rum livavo. Rum livavo means to raise up his heart. He will not act arrogantly, haughtily. Rum livavo, raise up his heart, right, to his fellows, or deviate from this instruction left or right, to the end that he and his descendants may reign long in Israel. This is a radical idea. The king is under the law. The king is the steward of the law. The king is the teacher of the law, the adjudicator of the law. The king is not the law, and the king is not above the law. Remember Louis XIV? Yeah, say it again.
L'état c'est moi.
L'état c'est moi. They say, Louis, you can't do that. It's against the interest of the state. And Louis says, L'état, the state, c'est moi. I am the state. I am the embodiment of the country. I am the law. I can do whatever I damn well please. Now, where do you get that attitude from? You put a guy on a throne, you put a crown on his head, you surround him with silver and gold, you put him on a horse, you put a statue of him in Central Park, he's going to start thinking that he's God. This is a problem, and all human beings are subject to this. So what are you going to do? You want a king? Okay, I'll let you have a king. Gesundheit. That's a Latin phrase, meaning if it's what you really, really want, think about it a minute. But here are the rules. There are going to be some limitations. Because I don't want the king thinking that he's above the law. And this is a radical idea, that the king is not above the law, that the king is a steward of the law. Now, there's another problem, though. There's a deeper problem. And we'll get to that in just a moment. And I'll tell you what the problem is, then I'll get all the comments. The deeper problem is, you Jews are impossible to lead. Impossible. Impossible people to lead. Right? And the Torah knows this. And that's why it's worried about all this. All right, so time out. We have a few comments. So let's start over here. Yes, Mrs. Abrams. You get the magic microphone so people all over the world can hear your wonderful contribution. Yeah, please.
Capital punishment. What about confession?
Confessions are not acceptable in Jewish courts.
Oh,
you cannot testify against yourself. You cannot testify against your family. Remember when your daughter got married and I said I need 2 witnesses for the ketubah that are not relatives? You were there, right? Why? Why do you need 2 witnesses who are not relatives? Because if there were ever a question about whether the marriage really took place, you can't have witnesses testify For or against family members, or for or against each other, or if they're against other family members. So when you have a ketubah, it has to be non-relatives. You can't testify against yourself. That's self-incrimination. So you can't confess to a crime. In Jewish life, Jewish law, you can't, because you can't testify against yourself, nor can you testify against a relative, right? So if you see your husband committing a crime, go find a neighbor quick to watch, because you can't testify, right? You can't call a wife to testify against her husband. Okay. All right. Someone else had a comment. Michael, yeah. Thank you.
To bring part of this back to sort of contemporary history.
Oh, no, please don't.
Yeah, no, not today.
I'm trying really hard.
1935.
Oh, all right, yeah.
Rudolf Hess,
Yeah.
at one of the big Nuremberg conferences, when he was introducing Hitler,
Yeah.
he said, Hitler est Deutschland, Deutschland est Hitler.
Yeah, yeah. That the idea is that the leader becomes the embodiment of the state. Look, in England, if you ever been to England? In Canada, it's the same thing. It's Her Majesty's Post. Her Majesty's Post Office. It's not the United States or the England. It's Her Majesty's Her Majesty's prosecutor, the Crown's prosecutor. The Crown, the King, the Queen, the monarch is the embodiment of the state. Right? It's the embodiment of the state. I mean, right now, I imagine that, Mrs. Windsor is having a real hard time watching this lunacy in Parliament, because she's a very dignified woman who cares very, very deeply about her people. So, and that's what the role is of the king, of the monarchy in England in a constitutional democracy. Right? So it's a really interesting question. In America, we have a problem. In America, the problem we have is that the President of the United States is both the head of state and the head of the government. Right? And because of that, if you disagree with the policies of the particular government, it looks like you're disrespecting the country, the state, right? Remember, forget this president. You think about during the Vietnam War, when many of us had a problem with some of the things that were being done in the name of the United States, and people said really nasty things about Nixon, for example, or Lyndon Johnson, and it was difficult because he's also the head of state. I mean, he represents the country, right? I mean, if you're a basketball player and you win a championship and the president invites you to the White House and you disagree with his policies, should you go? Because at that point, he's not playing head of government, he's playing head of state. You see what I'm saying? In England, in Israel, it's different. In England, Reuben Rivlin is the president of the country. He's head of state. And Bibi Netanyahu's head of the government. You separate the two. So you can swear allegiance to the state and disagree with the government without a conflict. In America, we get this all mixed up. Okay? All right, Douglas.
Couple of things. In England, first of all, after the Glorious Revolution, the Parliament is over the Queen.
Yeah.
It is. The ultimate.
All right, go ahead, yeah.
Secondly, it seems to me that the American founders got this a lot smarter than the Torah. And that by designing a system of checks and balances, and I guess I would point to Federalist 51, where Madison explicitly states ambition must be made to counteract ambition.
Right, you're going to see in a minute, as soon as I get through the next part, that the Torah actually got this idea too. And you'll see it in a moment. Not as explicitly as Madison did, but in its own way, okay? Turn to page 323. Now we're going to take a very short detour to talk about Jews and leadership. Anyone here ever been president of a synagogue? All right? You're about to see why the job is so hard, right? Andy had hair when he started, and yeah, right. All right, 323, 323, Exodus chapter 2, verse 11. Last line on the page. Sometime after that, after Moses was brought to Pharaoh's daughter, when Moses had grown up, page 324, he went out to his kinsfolk and witnessed their labors. Right? That's the Pesach story. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his kinsmen. He turned this way and that, and seeing no one around, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. A good thing or a bad thing? A good thing. Saved the guy's life. The Egyptian was beating the life out of him, and Moses stopped him, right? He's a little violent, but he did it. Yes, that's true, but he's a prince. He can do that sort of thing. The next day, when he went out the next day, he found 2 Hebrews fighting. So day 1 is Egyptian and Hebrew. Day 2 is Hebrew and Hebrew, Jew and Jew. Okay? Yes. So he said to the offender, why do you strike your fellow? I mean, it was clear to him why the Egyptian was beating a Jew, but Moses, who grew up in the palace of Pharaoh, can't figure out why a Jew would be beating on another Jew. It makes no sense to him, right? Or to me, but that's what happens, right? And the guy retorts to him, who made you chief and rule over us? Who died and made you king? And who is he talking to?
The Prince of Egypt.
Yeah, he's a slave talking to the Prince of Egypt. Does that strike anyone as ironic? Right? And Moses was frightened, and he thought, do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Moses was frightened and thought, the matter's known. When Pharaoh learned of the matter, he sought to kill Moses. Now, wait a minute. Day 1, he saves an Israelite, saves a Jew, from an Egyptian who's beating the life out of him, right? Day 2, everybody knows. Now, the only 3 people who were there were Moses, the Egyptian, and the Hebrew, right? Moses didn't tell anybody. The Egyptian is dead, so who told? The Hebrew. And what did he do? He told everybody. And by the second day, Moses' life is now in danger. Why? Because everybody now knows, right? And the guy says, do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Right? In other words, I don't want your help. Get out of my face. Who do you think you are? Now, what is Moses thinking to himself? Come on, what is Moses thinking? I saved this guy, and what did he do? He ratted me out. And not so they ratted me out, but they don't want my help. They don't want my help. Why are you killing your friend? And they're killing. So why? Why is this? When you have a people who is born in tyranny, when you have a people who is born by taking them out of tyranny, every authority who stands up in front of that people looks a lot like Pharaoh. This is a paradigm for the dilemma of Jewish leadership. The dilemma of Jewish leadership is anyone who stands up in front of us and says, I'm here to help you, we say, who died and made you king? Who gives you the right to talk to us? You don't have that authority. And then we do everything we can to tear the person down. Everything we can to tear the person down. And here's the paradigm. Moses, and we can go through the rest of the stories, but you know them by heart. Moses comes to them and says, I take you out of Egypt. I save your lives. I feed you in the desert. I bring you water. I give you God. And what do we keep saying? We're going to kill him. We keep trying to kill him. Freud said we actually did kill him, and that was the origin of Judaism. We keep trying to kill him. So here is one problem. We, Jews, have a really hard time with authority. Because every authority looks a lot like Pharaoh to us. Okay? Bruce.
You started the discussion of this with an assumption that what Moses was doing was correct.
No, not correct. He was saving a guy's life.
We don't know that he was saving a guy's life.
Yeah, a guy was getting beaten to death. Come on.
It doesn't say beaten to death.
Oh, it does too. Come on.
He takes authority in his own
Of
hand.
course, because he's a prince. He's allowed to do that.
But couldn't he have just said to the guy, stop beating him?
Yes, of course. But you see, Moses has a problem.
And if what he was doing was
he never went to a Jewish nursery school. In Jewish nursery school, the very first thing they teach you is use your, not your. There you go.
But
you
if
see?
what he was doing was correct.
Thank you.
If what he was doing was correct, he wouldn't have had to hide the Egyptian.
Of course, the question. But he's scared of Pharaoh because he's uncertain about his position in the palace, and he gets ratted out by the Jew who he tried to save. So the point is that anyone who steps up in front of us, we immediately identify with tyranny. By the way, just so that you understand, Americans are the same way, because we also begin our political existence as a rebellion against tyranny. Our sacred document is a declaration of independence, not a declaration of collective responsibility, but a declaration of independence, or we told George III to buzz off. Which is why whenever you run for office in America, you run against the government. Ladies and gentlemen, if I'm elected, I'll go to Washington and clean out those scoundrels. I will drain the swamp. I will parse out the special interests. I will rule with impartiality and fairness, not like those crooks that have been stealing from you all these years. Excuse me, Senator, you've been in Washington since you were 3. I mean, the funniest one was when one George Walker Herbert Wilson Bush, who was the son of a president and the grandson of a senator, ran against Albert George Herbert Walker Gore, who was the son of a senator and the grandson of a Gore, and both had been raised in Washington. I mean, like you couldn't have gotten 2 more Washington inside. But that's how you run for office. Why? Because if anybody stands up and says, "I really want to be president," we say, "No, get out of here. We don't want authority. We hate authority." But that's only one part of a paradox. Here's the other side of the paradox. Turn to page 529, please. 529, chapter 32 in Exodus. 529 in Exodus. Got it? When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain. Remember this story? Moses goes up the mountain to get the 10 Commandments. How long's he up there? Which is the Bible's way of saying a long time. Longer than you can wait. The people have no leadership. There's no one there to lead them. The people gathered against Aaron. And they said to him on page 530, top of the page, "Make for us a God who will go before us, for that man Moses who brought us from the land of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him. Give us an icon to stand in front of us. Make us a God to stand in front of us," right? So Aaron said, "Take off the gold rings in the ears of your wives, sons, and daughters, and bring them to me." And the people took off the gold rings and brought them to Aaron. And he took and made a molten calf, and he said, "This is God who brought you out of the land of Egypt." In the absence of leadership, what happens to us? Chaos. Spiritual chaos, moral chaos, and political chaos. So here's the paradox, ladies and gentlemen. Without leadership, we devolve into collective chaos, spiritual, moral, and political. But when we elect a leader, when we lift up a leader, what do we do with him? We kill him. We try to kill him. So we get a leader and we lift him up, and then we try to kill him, and then we have to live with the chaos. So we lift a leader and we try to kill him. That's a terrible pattern. That's a terrible pattern. And you can see this pattern playing out in the pages of the Torah. One more reference, and then we'll go back to Deuteronomy, if that's okay. One more reference, and that is the famous story of cousin Korach, page 860. Page 860. One more story, then we'll quit. Okay? Ready? Moses has them in the wilderness. Okay? Got it? 860. Chapter 16 in the book of Numbers. Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kohat ben Levi v'Datan of Aviram ben Aliyah. Now Korach, son of Yitzhar, son of Kohat, son of Levi, took himself along with Datan and Aviram, sons of Eliah, sons of Pelah, descendants of Reuben, together with 250 Israelites, chieftains of the community, men of repute, and they combined up against Moses and Aaron and said, "You have gone too far." This is not one but 3 rebellions all at the same time. And the 3 rebellions represent 3 alternative principles of leadership, of legitimacy. What makes Moses the legitimate leader of the people of Israel?
God.
God chose him. God chose him. But how do you demonstrate that? Right? So we have 3 different rebellions. Number 1, Korach rebels against not so much Moses but Aaron. He is also a son of Levi, but his yichus is better than Aaron's, because his father is born first. His pedigree is better. So he says to Aaron, why are you the priest and not me? I should be the priest, not you. You don't have a right to rule. The rule of primogeniture would give me legitimacy, not you. What makes you priest over us? Now, by the way, why would you want to be priest? Because you like meat. Because you eat off the public dole. Because it's a very lucrative position. So, Korach says, I have a better hereditary claim to leadership than either you or Moses, you or Aaron. Okay? Then we get Datan and Aviram. Who are they? Leaders of the tribe of? Reuben. What do we know about Reuben? Firstborn. We have a better claim to be leaders than you do, because you're only from the tribe of Levi, and we're from the tribe of Reuben, and we should be leading. That's not a bad idea, by the way. I mean, there are a lot of places that choose leaders based on heredity, right? And then 250 chieftains. That's a big number, by the way. 250 chieftains. That's like the board of the temple gathering up and saying, who the hell are you? And they're all men of repute. So who are they? What's their claim to leadership? What's their claim to leadership?
Their status in the community?
Yeah, they're elders of the tribes. So we have three different theories of leadership challenging Moses and Aaron. The priestly primogeniture, the tribal primogeniture, and the tribal elders. And each of them says, we have a right to lead. You don't. You don't. Now, it's really clear what Moses does, right? Moses whips out a chart, and he shows that he took a majority in the Electoral College in the last election. And that's how he proves his leadership, right? Wouldn't that be the way to do it? That's legitimacy. Or better yet, he shows that he is the son of the previous king. That's how that's a different way of proving your legitimacy as a leader. Or he shows that his IQ is higher than everybody else's. That's a different way of showing that you're a leader. Or he shows that the board of directors of the temple elected him president. Every organization, every human group, every human collective has a principle of legitimacy. And what's happening here is there's a debate in Israel. Who has the legitimate right to rule? And Moses says, what? There's no electoral college that proved that elected him. There's no board of directors that elected him. He can't prove that his IQ is higher than anybody else's. He's not better looking than everybody else. So what happens? It's a really interesting debate. I mean, if you read the story, it's really very interesting. Moses, so they say to him, and it's even one more rule. There's even one more layer, which is even more sly. For all the community are holy, all of them, the Lord is in your midst. Why do you raise yourself above the Lord's congregation? Moses, you told us we're all holy people. You told us that. You told us we're holy people. We're God's chosen. Well, if we're all holy people, who died and made you king? We're all equal. If we're all equally holy people, what right do you have to rule? You see the problem? Everybody see the problem? Now, what's the solution?
An earthquake.
What's the solution? Right. There is no solution. Look what happens. Moses falls on his face. When Moses heard this, he fell on his face. What do you mean he fell on his face? What do you mean he fell on his face? He had no answer. Why did he have no answer? First of all, he didn't want the job. Remember he didn't want the job? You remember all that? I mean, he wanted to stay in Midian with sheep. This is why. Sheep don't do this to you. Trust me on this. Sheep don't rise up and say, bah, you know. Sheep don't elect one of their own. I mean, sheep like sheep are sheep. Yeah, one lamb chop dinner and they do what you tell them to do.
When you have a herd, there's always a group taking off in a different direction.
Yeah, I know, but you know, with a stick and one lamb chop dinner. A rock. You just wave one lamb chop in the air and they do what you tell them to do. This is why Moses didn't want the job. He fell on his face. He had no way to prove it. So how did it end? How did it end? How did it end? Oh, this is great. This is for every synagogue president who ever, right? So he says to Korach, you guys bring your fire pans and we'll all go on the altar and see who God wants. So what does God do? He annihilates them all. Right? Right? Turn to page 864. right? So Moses says to all the rebels, okay, look, I didn't want this job. I didn't want to be king. I didn't want to be your ruler. I wanted to live in Midian with my sheep and my wife and my kids. I had a nice life. But you guys, I mean, God needed me to do this, right? So he says on page 864, Moses said, it's verse 28, by this you'll know that it was the Lord who sent me to do all these things. And if they're not of my own devising, if these men die as all men do, if their lot be the common fate of all mankind, it was not the Lord who sent me. But if the Lord brings about something unheard of, so for example, the ground opens up and swallows them, well, then you'll know that God sent me. Scarcely had he finished speaking these words when the ground under them burst asunder, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, and all Korach's people and all their possession, and they went down alive into Sheol, which is death, right? With all that belonged to them, the earth closed over them, they vanished from the midst of the congregation, and all Israel fled in shrieks. They said, oh, the earth swallowed us, and the fire went forth, and it consumed the rest of the guys, and everybody knew Moses was God's guy. Don't you wish you could have done that? Doesn't every leader in the world say, just once, I'll touch the ground with my stick, the stick will open up, the whole, I mean, don't you think Mitch McConnell wishes that Chuck Schumer and the Democratic Party would all be swallowed up in hell? Don't you think that he wishes that? Don't you think that, don't you, I mean, just, isn't that every dream, every leader's fantasy? But wait a minute, but I want to take this serious. That's a joke, and I apologize for that. But what's this saying? There is no agreed upon principle of legitimacy of leadership. If you need this kind of a miracle to prove that you're a leader, it means that there is no agreed upon principle of legitimacy, which means what? Which means it's going to be really, really, really hard to lead this people once Moses is gone. Right? Who leads after Moses is gone? That's going to be the great question. And that's why Deuteronomy is worried about you electing a king. Because in order to create a kingship that's going to have any authority, that king is going to have to set himself over the people. The only way for him to gain that authority is with power. This is a power move. I mean, think about what he did. This is what you call in what they call it a putsch, right? You eliminate your enemies. This is Putin. I mean, there's something profoundly totalitarian about this, right? You either follow me or you'll die. Okay, let's have an election now, shall we? Oh, look, Mr. Putin won 98.9% of the election, and it must be, he's a democratically elected leader of Russia, right? You know, I mean, this is, and that's what this represents. We're missing a theory of legitimacy in order to gain leadership. So this is going to be a problem. This is going to be a problem for the generations that follow Moses. This is going to be a problem throughout Jewish history. Who leads? Who leads us? I don't know if you know this, but we don't have a pope. You knew that, right? Please tell me you knew that. I mean, because you know, I mean, the funniest thing is in Israel, there's a guy called the chief rabbi. But you know what the funniest thing is? There's three of them. This is Ashkenazic, Sephardic, and Mizrahi. There's three of them. Now, think about that. How can you have three chief rabbis? I mean, just think about that. There's like, you know, like, wait a minute. I mean, one guy says it's kosher, one guy says it's treif, one guy says, it depends. I mean, it's like, what are you, like, because this is going to be a problem. It's a very serious problem in the Jewish people, and that's what this Torah portion is dealing with. The paradox is we need leaders. You can't have a collective without a principle of leadership, and you can't have leadership without a principle of legitimacy, because if you don't, we end up with chaos. And at the same time, with anarchy. With anarchy. And at the same time, we have this real difficult time accepting leadership. And that's what this story represents. All right, yes?
So,
Brian.
So, what do you think?
Stand up and be a leader. There you go.
So what do you think really happened?
What I think really happened?
The earthquake and all that.
No, I think this is a story that was told generations later to represent this paradox. That we need leaders, but we have never developed a commonly accepted theory of legitimate leadership. Here's what did happen. And we have time, we'll do another. What did happen is what something that Douglas represented a moment ago. The Bible after King David, the person who mastered this best was King David. King David is the once and future king of the people of Israel because he did something quite remarkable. He understood something that nobody else understood, that to create a principle of legitimacy, you've got to create a narrative, a story. And King David was a master. Not just was he a warrior and a poet, but King David was a master at creating a narrative, a story that elevated him as the once and future king of Israel. Look, this morning, 3-year-olds in my nursery school are sitting in a little circle in Tat Shabbat, and they're singing, David, Melech Yisrael, Chai, Chai, V'kayam. Translation, David, king of Israel, is alive and well. Now, any guy who's been dead for 3,200 years, and you still think he's alive and well, he created one hell of a narrative. You create a narrative. A leader creates a narrative. David HaMelech created a narrative that was so powerful, so overwhelming, that it gave him legitimacy as a leader that no other leader in all of Jewish history except Moses could match. Which is why the tradition is that not only was he the leader before, but when Mashiach comes, when Messiah comes, who will he be? Mashiach ben David. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu Agiladi, Bimhera biyamenu, Yahavo Eleinu, Im ben. Yes. Why is Mashiach going to be Ben David? Because David is the king of all kings, and Mashiach is going to be his descendant. His authority, the Messiah's authority comes from the narrative of King David. King David creates a narrative so powerful that he becomes the once and always king of Israel. Only one problem. He's a flawed human being. And when you create a human being, give a human being that much power, and power is, the narrative gives him power, all of his flaws become magnified. So what did we decide to do? We split power into 3. And here's where we get the separation of powers, right? We split power into 3. King, prophet, priest. King now has executive power. He adjudicates cases, raises an army, defends the kingdom, enforces the law. Does not make the law, enforces the law. That's Deuteronomy. That's what you just read. Prophet, what's the role of the prophet? Conscience of the people. He speaks truth to power. He reminds the king that he is under the law, that he is not the law. He calls out the king when the king violates the law and breaks the law. It is the most dangerous position in the kingdom.
He chooses.
Yes, and then the king tries to kill him. Why? Because who the hell wants a pain-in-the-ass guy walking around telling you you're doing it wrong? Right? Anyone ever been on a board of directors trying to get a budget for an organization, and there's always one guy, one woman, one person who sits there going, it's not enough. You haven't done enough. The tension between king and prophet is fruitful. It's fruitful because prophet reminds us that our compromises are compromises. Reminds us of our ideals. Reminds us of what we're reaching toward. King has to come up with a budget. You got to balance the damn budget, otherwise your organization don't work. The practicality of the king as executive versus the absolute idealism of the prophet. What's the worst thing that can happen? King kills prophet. What are you left with? Nobody to tell the king he's wrong, which means he can totalitarianism. What's even worse than that? Prophet kills king. What happens when prophets become kings? They become the worst of tyrants because they're absolutists. They're absolutists, right? What did Mao Zedong do? What did Stalin do? Tried to force the peasantry into that box of communism and ended up killing 40 million people in the 20th century, right? They become the worst. So you have king and prophet that have to be at tension with each other, but you need a third one called priest. What's the priest's job? Rodef shalom ve'ohev shalom. Make peace. The priest reminds us of where we've come from, of where we're going, of what our national narrative is. The priest is the peacemaker. Anyone ever been in an organization where the board has these long arguments, and then the meeting adjourns, and you go outside to the parking lot, and people continue the argument in the parking lot? By the way, if in the organization that you're in, you have short board meetings that come to quick consensuses and budgets are passed quickly, you've killed your prophet. P-H-I-T-E-T, right? If you have board meetings that last forever and can't ever come to a consensus, you've killed your king. If you have board meetings that have long arguments, and then we go out to the parking lot, and there's always one wise person who says, all right, guys, come on. Remember why we started this thing. Remember, we're here together. We're here to do this together. And we all shake hands and go out for a hot fudge sundae. That's your priest. In every Jewish organization, every human organization, but every Jewish organization, you need a king, you need a prophet, and you need a priest. You need a king to make the executive decisions, a prophet to remind you of your idealism, right, and also to appoint the king, right, but also to criticize the king. And you need a priest.
Yeah, when he didn't kill all the Amalekites.
Well, no, we're not there. That's a, but that's.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, no, come on.
David became king because Saul lost the kingship.
Yeah.
Because he wouldn't kill the children
of
the Amalekites.
Because he was dumb.
The prophet told him to kill.
Because he was dumber than a donkey. That's why.
Those aren't my ideals.
I know.
Those are not my ideals.
I know. You'll be a great king, but a lousy prophet. That's it. No, but see, this is the.
I'm looking for Tsar.
Right.
There's opening.
Is there an opening? Yeah.
There is an
Look in the paper. Okay. An organization needs a king, a prophet, and a priest. A king makes executive decisions based on practicality. A prophet reminds us of our ideals and demands that we reach higher. And a priest brings peace. And that's the division of power that the biblical tradition settles upon in the wake of King David's accomplishment, right? That's the division of power. That's how the Bible understood this leadership issue, okay? So the question is, ladies and gentlemen, do you want to be a king? Are you by nature a king, a priest, or a prophet? Yeah, each of us has a sort of natural way. Gelman is a prophet. He's a prophet. He really even looks this part. I mean, you know. The only problem is that prophets live very dangerous lives, right? It's true. It's true, right? Kings are practical, thoughtful, reflective.
You're a king.
No. And then priests are deep and wise and bring us together and shower everyone with affection and find a way to bring wholeness and holiness to a community. But here's the point of this. There's always going to be conflict. You build conflict into the system because conflict in the system is what prevents it from becoming totalitarian or partial and blind. That's the way the system works. Next week, we enter the land of Israel. So buckle your seatbelts. Thanks so much. Have a good Shabbos. Thanks. You well? You okay? Yeah? You doing all right? You look good. You look good. You look good. How are you? How are your beautiful kids? You send my love? Yes, please.
Such a good job with them.
You did such a good job with them. I love your kids.